Hello everyone, my name is Ayeneh.
Hi, my name is Dory Bar.
Hi, my name is Daneshjoo.
And welcome to Sedaye Daneshjoo. For today's episodes, we will be talking about letters of rec. This is something that applies to both high school and college students, and at some point or another, you might need one. And it can feel a bit intimidating to ask, depending on the professor or the supervisor you're volunteering with, or any sort of situation like that. So we'll just talk about how to build those relationships over time, how to ask, and yeah, we'll just go ahead and get right started. So I know getting a letter of rec in high school versus college can be a bit different. For those of you who have experiences getting a letter of rec in high school, what do you think has been like the big difference versus getting one in college?
Okay, I can start. For me, specifically in high school, you're closer to your teachers because you see them every day, every period, and the classrooms are much smaller. So your teachers actually do get to know you better than you would for, say, like, than college when classes could be big, as large as like 200 people. So it's easier to build that connection with teachers in high school and keep that connection because it's a tiny building, you're not on a huge college campus or huge university campus. So I would say would be the biggest difference for me.
Yeah. I think, like, personally thinking about my experiences, like, I was a bit more introverted and shy in high school, so I had a harder time talking to my teachers, even though it was a smaller classroom, just like because of my nature. But yeah, I think just it's also important to remember to try to, like, if you are introverted and shy, step outside that comfort zone. It might be a bit difficult, but you know, making a good, I think, first impression's good, and then just trying to, like, stay out of trouble as long as you can in high school, like getting off your phone, things like that. But let's also talk about college, because I know that's much more common and that's needed for all different graduate schools and programs. In those large class sizes, what do you guys recommend is the best approach to stand out?
In terms of standing out in a large class, like a lot of us have had this experience that it feels difficult because you were kind of looking for a reason to approach the professor or that lecturer, for example. I think the best method of choosing how to approach someone or whether or not to approach a specific professor is how much passionate you are about that specific subject that they're teaching. And this is also very common that a lot of professors talk about their own research experiences throughout their lectures, and they kind of focus more on what their expertise is and their specific field. So that kind of gives you a window of opportunity to approach them through that window and talk about their research, especially if it's something that you're interested in as well. And I think this is one of the first things that you should think about when you're asking yourself whether or not I should ask this professor or not is, am I passionate about this person's research? Am I passionate about the field that they're working in and they're teaching in, or not?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I would say even with that, if you're not so interested, but you still need to have like an English major or an English professor or English department give a letter of rec, and that might not be what you're interested in, I definitely recommend going to office hours, trying to talk with the professors, building that connection beyond just the booked capacity classroom, because that really gives them insight into who you are, and stay in touch. So throughout the years, like if you have this professor one semester but you won't have them for the next 3 years, keep emailing them, send them updates. Hey, wanted to let you know, like, your work really helped me in this way, or I was thinking about this, or like even like tiny updates. Once you do get to know them on a deeper level, you can't just be like, hey, just wanted to reach out, I'm like here in my life right now, thank you so much for mentoring me and letting me like grow so much. And they'll be very receptive to that.
Yeah, I think this is very hard actually, because sometimes when people take gap years as I did, at first you're not applying to like all medical schools or like or professional schools or graduate schools that you're applying to. Like you don't really know who you have to keep in touch with during those gap years. And that was a big challenge for me that actually happened that when I started applying for medical school, I noticed that one of the schools that I was applying to needed a letter of rec from some professor that lectured you in humanities, for example. And I had taken humanities courses a lot in the past, but I wasn't aware that I'm supposed to like keep in touch with this person or like have some sort of connection with these professors in order to apply for medical school. And I think this is also a big challenge to figure out early what program you want to apply to, and what are mainly the kinds of letter of recs that they require from you.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Completely, I agree. Sometimes like you'll need a letter of rec from like a topic or a major that you're not really interested in, or you didn't really know that you needed one, and checking each school's requirements for those letter of rec is really, really important. I know firsthand because when I was applying, I needed 2 science letters of recommendation, which I guess was really common. I didn't know at the time, so I was very naive. And then so last minute I was scrambling, trying to get a letter of rec, which don't recommend, but luckily I had a nice professor who was able to work with me in that time limit. And just, I guess, there's a lot of different things that might come up, and keeping those connections over time is pretty difficult. I noticed that a lot of the professors that I was able to get a letter of rec from, I not only kept up with them over time, like you said, but I also did some TA work with them. So also keeping in mind that maybe if you want to keep those connections strong, consider working in their lab for research, or also maybe if they don't have research, being a teaching assistant for them. That could go a long way when you're asking and building those experiences, and that kind of makes it easier. So I guess while we know how to build those relationships now, or we have somewhat of an idea, how would you approach your professor or supervisor for a letter of rec?
I think approaching is very important in the sense that like you will also want to give them a lot of time to make decisions about whether or not they would like to write you a letter, and like because the process of writing a letter itself is it's a very lengthy process, because you can imagine like the person is going to write a draft and then they're going to review it, edit it multiple times, because this is an important application for you and they would want you to succeed. So as long as you have a good connection with this person, you can ask them either through an email, or if you're in touch with them very frequently in person, even better in person. If you can talk about them, you can talk about your experiences. A lot of times it's very good to send your CV as well at the same time when you're asking for a letter of rec, because they know you in the field that you have worked together with, but they might not know what other things you've done, and these become helpful when you're writing your letter. So I would say in order to figure out how to approach them, see how much in-person communication you have, and how much in contact you are with them, and try to, if possible, do that in person, ask that in person, and have either your CV emailed to them or have it with you so that they can take a look, and I'm sure if you have a good connection with them, they would be more than happy to help you with your goals. So that's, I think, the main method of approaching, I guess, in my experience.
Yeah. I think if you're able to talk to them in person, of course, that's like more helpful and beneficial. And then maybe sending a follow-up email like, hey, just to remind you, I'm so like happy that you're able to write this letter for me. Here's like more information about me, including that CV. I've also known some friends who include their personal statement in their email just so they have an idea of what their goal is for whatever program it is for medical school. They can maybe have a better idea about your character and what to really focus on, if what the goal and mission is. For like other internships or stuff like that, that might not be as applicable, maybe the essays, but yeah, definitely sending that CV, those personal statements, really important. Sometimes in the email, I've written like, this is kind of the main focus of what I want to do, sort of like a brief introduction. You don't want to make the email too long because they're very busy, especially like if I ask my lab PI, he has 100 different emails going on. So maybe also just setting up a appointment over Zoom if you can't see them in person, asking for that's really helpful. And sometimes some of my professors have asked me to sort of pre-write a letter of rec. And of course, there's the, you know, that trust that they're going to review it and like look at it and all that stuff. But when you're pre-writing a letter of rec, I don't know if you guys done this, how does it, I know it feels really strange because you're writing about yourself and you're writing all these great things. What has your experience with that been like, if you've had any? And what do you guys typically try to focus on?
For me personally, I would actually stay away from pre-writing. I know I've been told of cases where a lot of universities could tell, oh, this is a student writing about themselves, and that automatically breaks like trust and loyalty for the university. And so I would personally, like if I had a professor who told me to pre-write, I would tell them, I'm sorry, I'm not going to, but just these are informations about me that you could use, but like I can't pre-write the letter. If you're not willing to write it, I can ask someone else. Yeah. And that's something I would strongly recommend.
That's a very interesting take. And I think it's actually very funny because you're writing your personal statements and like you're spending all this time drafting, editing, and so for the personal statement, which is about yourself. And then you ask your reference, can you also give me a reference? And then they're like, can you write it? And after writing all about yourself for the whole month, and then you have to again write about yourself, but now you gotta care that you have to write it from someone else's perspective, and it becomes very challenging. I've had to do this a couple of times in the past, and it's been very challenging. And I honestly, like, if I put myself in the shoes of the person who is asking you to pre-write it, it becomes it kind of makes sense because yes, like I kind of know the field that I'm applying to better than someone else who's maybe not in this field. Like for example, if I'm applying to medical school, I'm choosing a letter of recommendation from someone who was a mentor of me in the community. Like they expect you to have more information about the field that you're going into. So it is kind of easier for me to pre-write it and then they can review. But at the same time, it becomes very challenging as an applicant because you have a lot of things on your plate at that point. You're studying for your exams, you are still in school, or you're working, you are also writing your personal statement and preparing your applications. And now on top of everything else, you have to write your own letter of rec.
Yeah. No, that completely resonates with me. Just so much writing already going on, and then having that being on top of everything is like really not ideal. And of course, like you said, it's way more beneficial if, you know, it's done by them because it's more personal. They can really tell who's writing it. Like I think I have a very unique writing style, and if I were to like completely have it like pre-written, they would know. Sometimes like when professors or PIs ask, I will just tell them, hey, like I can remind you of my experiences and what I have done, like sort of in that regard, and maybe just a refresher, and just have that and send that to you. But then how you want to present that, if you want to include that and whatever else you want to add, feel free to do that, obviously in like a polite way, because you don't want to come across as, you know, rude or anything like that. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that go into it, and there's a lot of, I've like heard stories about some professors like bribing like it. Yeah, I've heard some really horror stories about letters of reg, which is just unethical and not okay. But yeah, just make sure that it's being done in a ethical way. Building that trust is really important. You don't want to have that like completely, set a bad taste for your whole application overall completely. But yeah, I think also one thing I want to talk about is like in that email, sometimes I will just ask, are you able to write a strong letter of rec for me? Because when you're not sure if they're just using a template, filling those spaces out and then sending it. And I think one way I try to like avoid having that letter of rec sound very generic or not as strong is like including in the email or in person, letting them know, are you able to write a strong one for me? And that kind of, they get an idea of, okay, yes, like, I get what you're saying, you don't want it to be generic. So I think that's helpful. Do you feel like for med school, I know you guys have a lot of experience with that, do you think your most meaningful letters of rec have been from professors or from clinical work, volunteering, research?
I think personally for me, because during my gap years I was doing 2 years of research. I think in my experience, my most meaningful or most powerful letter of rec that I received was from my PI from the lab that I was a part of. But I think that really depends on what kind of program you're applying to. Like if you're, for example, applying to a program that's more involved in like community work and not really like academic, not in a big academic institution, at that point I feel like the letter of recs that are coming from people in the community is going to be more helpful than someone like in the lab. So it very much depends on what kind of program you're applying to. So if you're planning on, if you're shooting for an academic program where there is a lot of research, I would say that you've got to pay the most attention to your research-oriented mentors and getting letter of recs, like good letter of recs from them, as opposed to if you're applying to community programs, then it's most important to involve the people you've worked with in the community in that process.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think for me personally, it was also my PI. I also took 2 years of gap year for research, the fellowship with Operation Smile. So I think because of those 2 years, I got to build a very strong relationship, and my senior fellows knew my work ethic really well, and they were able to talk on my behalf and tell the stories of what I've accomplished during those 2 years. So I would say someone who knows you best too, someone who you've been able to build that connection most with, and they know your work ethic, they know the accomplishments that you've done firsthand. That would be a very strong letter of rec, and I would prioritize that over my AP teacher in high school or my OChem professor in college.
Yeah.
I think it'll be very interesting how artificial intelligence will change this landscape, especially when we talked about pre-writing things. I feel like with the ChatGPT and the Groks that have changed a lot of things in our day-to-day. It'll be very, very interesting to see how these would change or have already changed letter of recommendations, because I can imagine I can imagine if someone asked me to pre-write a letter of rec, I can basically give my information to, for example, ChatGPT and say, okay, I'm write this from the perspective of this person, and this is my information. This is what I want to emphasize, and I think that will change a lot of things in the future for application.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really interesting segue into the world of AI and the implications that has. I can only imagine it's not going to be as great, because I don't know if you guys used AI or ChatGPT, you've seen a lot of times when it's generating responses, letters, emails, it has a very distinct writing that I think anyone who's really seen it a lot can spot it from a mile away. And I think definitely that could cause a lot of ingenuine letters of recommendation, and it might actually decrease the value of letters of rec over time, and maybe programs won't really ask for it. So yeah, that's really interesting, because like you guys can tell when ChatGPT writes something, it has like the long dash, like there's certain words that are just very much commonly used, and I think that might really affect it. So no, that's a really interesting point. Wow.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud that maybe like you can also ask ChatGPT, like, because if you've had a long relationship with ChatGPT, like if you're asking everyday questions from it, like it can you can probably ask it to based on its memory and the way that you have talked to ChatGPT, maybe write this letter of recommendation, or put it, like, use your own words, because I'm pretty sure it's capable of that kind of like process too.
Yeah, like sort of instructing it on how you prefer it to write. Yeah, you know what? That's an interesting point. So I guess if you really know how to use it and know how to use it to your advantage, I guess like it could work. But yeah, no, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think also for letters of rec, one thing I want to include to the viewers watching is personally my experiences getting letters of rec from my clinical experiences. A lot of my supervisors I worked with don't really have a lot of familiarity with writing letters of rec. So I think when messaging, people like that, then it's important to include like some general ideas or some websites for, professionals on how to write a letter of rec, give them the resources, and also, most importantly, remind them to include, typically, depending on the graduate school, there's different requirements, right? But reminding them to include that cover letter and the signature and all of that, those formatting things are really important, because when I took my letters, I used Interfolio, and that's like sort of a website that collects and stores your letters of rec, and a lot of times it does like the screening of checking the letter for you to make sure that it has like the cover letter and the signature. I think there is a fee, but if you're a FAP applicant, I think it might get approved. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, so just making sure that those are also included for depending on who it is. But usually lab PIs, professors, they've done it 100 times and they have it down. So don't stress about that. But yeah, just how far in advance do you guys ask for a letter of rec?
That's a good question. I think definitely like side on the air of like caution way in advance, like 3 months in advance, because a lot of times they'll like be like, yeah, I'll get it to you. I know one of my friends had a professor who was like, yeah, for sure, I got you. And every week she would have to like remind the professor, and the professor ended up not sending it. Oh, wow. And that held her back a year. Wow. So get more than you need. Don't just get like 3 because you're like, oh, most schools just need 3. Get as much as you can from everyone. Know which ones to use when you like are limited to 2, or like which ones are the most powerful ones. Coming from the most powerful people, like most powerful PIs, people who know you the best, but get so many. Like ask every teacher. This is one of the best advices I've been given, because you're right. I also used Interfolio, and like one of the ones that I thought would be very strong, they didn't include their signature, and I knew like I can't use it anymore, and I barely have any time now to like ask them to put it in again. I have to like submit my application. So yeah.
Yeah, that becomes very important. My experience has been that sometimes even asking like 3 months in advance, sometimes it's too early, and the for example the PI or the person like told me, okay, I'll write one for you, but just let me know about a month before. 'Cause like I feel like there is also a lot of things going on with their career, their life, and stuff as well. So err on the side of caution. Tell them early, and if they would need more, they would definitely need reminders, they will tell you. But if you're seeing that you're not hearing back, because this is someone that you have been in contact with pretty frequently. So you can bring it up in conversations as you go on. Like if you're asking 3 months in advance, like maybe after a month, like another email, and after another month, another email, and then another 2 weeks. I think that would be a good plan that I followed personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard somewhere in between like asking 6 months in advance and 3 months I've also heard, but just checking in every 2 weeks sounds like a good idea. Personally, for my lab PI, I already knew in advance that I needed to CC his assistant in there because he gets so many emails, it was going to get lost. So if you know of like, I guess, a situation or your lab PI has an assistant and that's the way he prefers or he or she prefers, then definitely remember to do that as well. But yeah, just we talked on a lot of different topics on how to, you know, ask and build those relationships and what to include in those emails and all of the nitty-gritty information. So thank you guys so much for sharing, and thank you guys so much for listening. That's all we have on today's episode. I hope that helps you feel more comfortable getting a letter of rec and knowing what to expect and how to prepare for that. Thank you so much for watching. Sedaye Daneshjoo.